Hey guys, so I noticed people really seem to like me making the half lap joint in the review video that I did of this SKIL sliding 10-inch compound miter saw. So I decided I'm going to make a quick video on how to make a half lap joint. The first thing you're going to need is your wood, and a half lap joint is basically where you're going to cut where your joint is. You're going to cut away half of the width of the wood. So the first thing that you're going to need to do is figure out what is half of the thickness of your wood. So these are 2x2s that I'm using for this demonstration. So they are actually 1.5 inches thick. So we will need a 3/4 inch depth cut. What you're going to want to do is set your depth stop here on your miter saw. Most miter saws have a depth stop on them, but you're going to want to set it so that it stops 3/4 inches above the plate if your wood is a 2x2 like mine. I also have a 3/4 inch piece of wood, and you can use that to space it as well. Basically, you'll just want it to just barely touch, barely grab when you run it across there. It grabbed a little too much there, and you really want to be as precise as possible. You can always take a little more off, but you can't put any back on. So there we go. So it just barely makes a mark there. So I'm going to lock this where it's at by turning that part there, and then just double check. Yeah, just barely grab. And if you want, you can also measure the height of the blade as well to the bottom tooth. Also, one thing that you're going to want to do for a sliding compound miter saw like this is to have a sacrificial piece to put against the fence, because when this slides back, it doesn't cut the very back part that's against the fence at the same depth. All right, so next, mark where you need your cut to be made. You can either use the wood like this. Make sure it's square because you want this to be a nice, perfectly square thing. Or you can just get yourself, in my case, I need it to be 1.5 inches. So I can just mark 1.5 inches there. All right, so your first cut is going to be on the inside. And then you'll want to go inside the other side there. All right, so we got the edges marked. And again, we can always come back and make it wider, but we can't make it thinner. So give yourself a little bit of room to work with. So now what you want to do, since you have the outside edges of this cut, is you're going to want to just come back and take the rest of this out. We can clean up the bottom here, but first we're going to check and make sure that it fits the other piece like we want it to. So this one's a little bit thin, so we're just gonna kind of nibble it out until we get it about where we need it. All right, so there. See that? It just fits now. So we have the width on that one right. So now what you can do is you can either use a chisel to finish that out, or you can, and you got to be careful doing this, hold it there and kind of run it back and forth until it hogs it out. All right. So we had marked the other ones. We just did 2 little marks here, so we're just going to cut on the inside of those marks. Got the outside ones, now take out the rest. Now they should fit. And you have yourself a crossed half lap joint. Another way you can do this is on the end if you want an end joint for like a box end. And at the end here, I'm going to show you kind of a fun way to connect these permanently. Well, that's a well-fitting joint. Let's get it. There we go. So another thing you can do is just mark the width here on this one. And then we'll mark the width on this one here. Doesn't need to be perfect because we're going to leave ourselves something to work with. So inside of the marked cut there, and then just take the rest out. All right, and you can take more time with your joint. I'm trying to do this real quick for demonstration purposes. But also one thing you want to remember is that when you set the depth stop, it will go slightly deeper just from the natural tendency to push on it. There's usually a little bit of flex. So just keep that in mind when you're setting. You might want to try doing some of these before you cut some valuable wood. Okay, so now let's do the other one. See, now you have another half lap joint here that can be used as a corner if you need it. All right, let me show you one final fancier way to do a half lap joint, and that is with changing the angle. So let's turn this way. We're just going to do a 45-degree angle one, but whatever angle you need, you can just do yourself a little bit of math. Again, in this one, I'm just doing a demonstration, so I'm not being super exact, but just measure about the width of what you want. There and there. Remember, when you are doing any sort of angle cut with this, remember where your fingers are, because if you're holding on to the wood, you can forget that you're going back towards your fingers really easily. So just be careful where that blade is going. And another thing you can do is just kind of break these things out like that, and then hog them out. All right, fits. Now let's do the next one. And remember, depending on what size you want, you're going to need to do an opposite angle for the mark. And you could even, when you have this done, you can wait to mark it until you fit that in there, and then just mark on each side like that. Now let's do those 45s. Watch those fingers. You want to be careful not to pull hard or push hard against the side of the blade, because you could potentially cause an issue where it catches it and tries to throw it, and your hand could get caught up in there if you're not careful. So just a nice gentle tap on either side of that blade, and then there we go. So you have a different type of a deal there. If you wanted to do some supports or something like that, you just, whatever angle you need. So to join these, one thing you can do is just slap some wood glue in there and then clamp them together and they'll stick. But if you want them to look a little bit fancier, what I like doing is getting a drill, going straight through like that, and then getting a corresponding size dowel, and you can just knock it down in there and cut it off with a flush cut saw. Now this dowel is actually just a little bit too small for that, the size that I cut that, but you'll kind of get the idea here. And then once you sand that off and coat it, or however you're going to treat it, it looks a little bit fancier than just a regular joint, and it gives it some extra sticking strength as well. Well, I hope you found this tip useful. Again, be careful when using the sliding compound miter saw. Any saw that's got that kind of power, you just got to be a little bit careful. Don't want to lose any fingers. If you're interested in this particular saw, which I absolutely love, this shadow line that it has is just amazing for knowing where you're going to cut. I will put my review of this saw at the end of this. I'll also have a link down below for it on Amazon if you want to check it out.